Hey Primatech peeps, and welcome back to the Primatech Files, a Southgate Media Group podcast dedicated to all things Heroes Prime and Heroes Reborn related. This is the final chapter of my journey through the RPGing realm. I've decided to talk to some of the guys from Heroes the RPG. We have No One Special.
Hi.
Quillkeeper.
Hiya.
And Caboose.
Howdy, how you doing?
Cool. So let's just get right into it. It's a Pro Boards RPG, which I've discussed already, so we don't really have to kind of go into that. So let's just start with, can any of you explain to the audience Heroes the RPG, you know, when it started, all that kind of good stuff?
Actually, it started way back in November of 2006, shortly after the series started. I was friends with someone on a Lost RPG at the time, and we were really excited, and he just decided he was going to start this RPG and invited me to come and be part of it. And so after he got it going and got it organized, just 2 days later I joined. Really, it just took off because we were extreme fans. And I kind of ended up stealing it from Six when he got a little busy in life. I say stealing, but honestly, he just wasn't ever there. And so I ended up running it. And it was about 2 years after it started that I ended up adminning it.
Can I just ask you all individually, like how you first got involved in RPGing and why you kind of started doing it? Quill, do you want to start us off?
Well, some friends and I, we did tabletop role-playing games originally, but then when that became an issue, we started our own online forum, just continuing through that. That kind of stalled for a bit, and I was getting frustrated because I had nothing to write. I'd written since I was old enough to do so. And my wife actually, because I liked Heroes, my wife found the site for me. And then, so that was in 2010 I joined. Long story short, that's that. Been there ever since.
Nice. Caboose?
Yeah, so about 2 years before the site started, so that would have been back in 2004, I suppose, I got started on a Lost RPG, which is actually where I met Six and Janey. We were playing around for a couple of years there before the RPG here started, and we've had fun.
I'll just call you Special.
You can call me Janey. Everybody knows me as Janey. I got started on the Lost RPG. I've just always been a writer, and I think I was just going through a time in my life where I needed a hobby. And I found RPGing online and found the Lost one because I was a huge Lost fan. And that's where I met Caboose. So kind of just snowballed from there. I admin now a couple of sites. So
over on Eclipse, we were pretty much just straight away like we were going to go with original characters only. Why did you guys decide to involve canon character, like a mixture of canon and original characters? And also, how have you found people who have picked up the canon characters?
The people that pick up the canon characters were always fans of the show. And I think that's how it opened up into being, the name of this RPG is Heroes, Heroes the RPG, and it was always based on the series. I think that it was originally just canon with a few OCs because everybody that joined was a huge fan of Heroes in that first season. And so everybody wanted to play Claire, everybody wanted to play Peter, everybody wanted to play, these big on-screen characters who they just kind of associated with and struck them. And so they kind of wanted to live their lives and be in their shoes. And I think that having the canons available really opened it up to distinct fans of the show rather than just other people on the internet who wanted to play superhero.
How do you keep the original characters' powers from being so fantastical?
Well, one of the great things that we ended up doing, and it kind of evolved, but we took the powers so that it was not going to involve any supernatural, because we had a lot of people trying to bring magic into it.
Yeah.
And so we just said, this is scientific based, and then we got people to start writing up scientific definitions, if you will, of the powers and how they work. But that's how we've gotten away from that, because we designed the wiki then. We've got a link to powers and stuff so that people understand where we're coming from. And you kind of have to make it scientific, period.
Well, I like the wiki. I think that it's just it's an expression of someone who has way too much time on his hands.
Just another little side question. Obviously, the site was started just after Heroes started. How did the show kind of affect those canon characters in the RP?
In the beginning, everybody was kind of guessing about these people's personalities and where they were going to go and who they were. And so, like, I took Claire right away. She really enthralled me because, frankly, I really love that episode where she's like on the morgue table and everything's opened up. And but in taking her, I just ended up playing her as like a high school girl that was really confused about what was going on, and it evolved a lot from there. Directions where don't need to go, but
in season 3, you had Peter get depowered. Essentially, did that affect it in the RP or not?
The person playing Peter at the time really didn't care to have him depowered, and so we didn't enforce that. Basically, when we took the volumes from the show and put them in the site, it was very much a background. We knew our endpoint, but everything in between could kind of be different. I mean, you could take a creative license on it and say, this is more like how that happened rather than how it did in the show. Mm-hmm. And so it was a little more fun to kind of create how that endpoint came. In the end, Peter did end up the player did allow himself to be depowered, but it happened completely differently.
Okay. Can you guys tell me how you kind of started to diverge from the canon?
We started following the canon story as closely as we could, especially during that first season when we didn't really know as much of what was going on. But as we went on to later seasons, season 2 and 3, we took the season as it came, and we allowed people to start playing the new characters right away. We allowed people to start playing Arthur as soon as season 3 got started. We allowed people to start playing Daphne and Adam Monroe, those sorts of things. But the stories themselves were very much player-driven. We gave them the endpoint, as Janey was saying, but the journey was entirely their creation.
Okay. Do you guys kind of have site-wide storylines, or is it just totally kind of user-driven storylines?
No, it is. We do site-wide plots, and what we do is we kind of guide it and giving updates every couple of months as far as what's happening in the background. So they have an environment to play in. And then, we'll kind of talk about these big bads, like we had someone named Yeoman Breeze during the villains time who kind of we took and carried on for a couple volumes on the site, just looking for alpha supremacy. And so he was a big bad, and there were major terrorist attacks all around the world that the people in sight would have to react to, because this is the world they're living in. But in reality, people could either join his group and be part of the plot, join the resistance, or they could just play within that environment, so that they were affected by the site-wide plot, but they weren't necessarily in it.
Did you find the site-wide plot become affected because of how people were reacting to it? Obviously, were you just like, okay, this is the storyline that's going to happen and this is how it's going to go? Or did you find yourself kind of changing up the story because of some of the events that were happening that were kind of not out of your control, but through the users?
In general, we never had to change anything because we automatically had left it so wide open that as long as we got to the end point, we didn't necessarily care how it happened. But we would give updates on things every couple months to push the plot forward just so it didn't stagnate.
How much input do the users on the site get in terms of the site-wide story or the site-wide plot?
As much as they want. Some people don't want to get involved in that, but obviously, as Jamie said, we push it along. But generally, as I said, we keep site plots as open as possible to allow people to react. We have an idea of where we're going. The actual events that get there, if someone wants to do something, we can't micromanage it. Sometimes people can take ages to write in a thread, and it's worth the wait.
Okay.
Sometimes we have to have staff take over a little bit and hurry it along.
So you essentially have like little points that you want to hit in a storyline, and it's just the middle's kind of left up to the players to kind of get there, and then you just say, okay, we're going to start hitting this point now, so let's try and sway it that way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Is it a lot of NPC characters that you have to kind of do that, or do you end up like dropping your own personal characters in there to kind of move it towards that?
There's not usually a lot of NPC use. I think we've created characters and we've left it open. Like when we did Resurgence storyline, there were people that were locked up from the terrorist group, and we said these were escapees. Make an escapee and let's make this new group. And we invited people to create cannons for the site. They were site cannons then. Okay. That were these important players in the new plot. So it was kind of fun because they had their own take on what these characters were. They got to create them from the bottom up.
Okay.
All we did was say we needed a male or a female in about this age range.
Okay. Kind of going back to canon characters, obviously Heroes had a lot of the graphic novels and the webisodes and all the kind of stories and all that extra content. Did you guys follow that, and did you find characters from those stories kind of finding their way into your RPG?
Yeah, we absolutely did. I know during the first initial series of Heroes, I followed a lot of the comic books, especially the first several years. I mean, life gets busy, you don't follow them consistently all the time. But when we found players coming in and saying, okay, this is a canon from the comics, and this is somebody that I'd like to play, and we considered them canons. So we let them play them, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to bring people in from the other facets of the story.
Just another kind of off-topic question, but did any of you play the kind of, I can't remember what it was called, but it was like a Heroes Choose Your Own Adventure game? And you kind of, does anyone remember that? I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't
I do recall that.
It wasn't the ice stories. It was like you made a character and then you had to make a decision like every kind of day, and like every day you would get like health points and stuff like that. Did anyone play that?
Very, very briefly.
Yeah, I never even knew about it, I guess. Or
Okay.
I've long forgotten about it, but
This is the first I've heard about it.
Okay. It was pretty cool because I remember like starting to play it, and then some of the characters were like lifted onto the kind of ice stories, and one of my characters was on the ice stories and he hated Claire, and I was like, that's kind of cool because at that point I was like, I'm not really a big fan of Claire, so that kind of works out. So yeah. Can you explain the kind of main volumes or storylines that have happened over the years on Heroes the RPG?
Since we got started a while ago, Genesis through Redemption really, we followed the storyline and had it end essentially the same way, with the big exception being Redemption, where instead of Claire revealing to the world the existence of specials, we sort of cut that out. We had a pretty strong backlash from our players who did not want the secret to go public. And that was a very strong point of contention among the players for a very long time. So the next volume that we took up would have been With a Whimper. That was the first really user-driven storyline. That was one that we came up with completely originally and had almost nothing to do with the show. It was helmed by original characters. It was following a storyline that was completely divergent from anything that had been done before. There were no tie-ins to the comics, to the shows, to the webisodes, anything like that. And it was sort of us saying, the show may be over, but we're going to continue. And so With a Whimper was the story of Nemesis and, as Janey was saying, Yeoman Breeze and the terrorist attacks. And that offered a lot of dramatic opportunity, people responding to events that pretty closely paralleled real-life events. And it worked out pretty well. We got to do a lot of character development that way. With a Whimper ended just a couple of years ago, and we've since gone on to Eulogies, which has been sort of the aftermath and recovery from that world-shaking event. But Eulogies has been pretty unique because we held a referendum on the website, and we got an almost unanimous vote this time, just last year, to take the secret public and reveal to the world that specials exist. And we're taking that sort of to follow along and parallel Reborn as much as we can, to sort of set up the world that we took in a completely different direction and still have a story where Reborn can play out.
How was the secret revealed? Was it done like the show, or did you have your own spin on it?
Oh no, we took it exactly from the show. We had Claire jump from a Ferris wheel and splat on the ground and reveal to the world that she was immortal. We've left it pretty mysterious at this point as to who was actually responsible. Was it a shapeshifter? Was it someone else who was a regenerator that was made to look like Claire? Or was it a Claire from a different timeline? We've left that mystery pretty open and available to be explored. But other than that, it happened very much the way that it did in the show.
So what is the kind of next big storyline that people can get involved in if they want to?
we're doing Brave New World is basically what we've done.
Okay.
Storylines coming up. Obviously, we've got at the moment to mirror the actual real life presidential elections that are happening. We're doing our own one on site, which we've invited players who think who want to get involved in it to run a candidacy. So we're going to be doing like the whole presidential debate and things like that. But in line with the other heroes thing, during the With a Whimper, Yomin Brees, he created a bioweapon called Invidia, which was basically horribly fatal. But those that survived it developed abilities. We have a covert government group called CORE. It's an abbreviation. I can't remember exactly what it means for, but one of their branches is the Genesis Initiative. And the Genesis Initiative were on ground, and they stopped this bomb from going off in New York, but they've kept it. And so we're going to have a rogue Genesis agent sell the location of this bomb to whoever wants it, and then so obviously the complex is going to get raided. So we're going to have a big, exciting sort of story arc with this raid trying to get this like dangerous super weapon. That's stories we've got coming up at the moment.
The Genesis storyline is really not necessarily a site-wide plot as much as it is a player-driven plot that's happening within the environment of this transition. So it's just an example of the many kinds of stories and plots that go on, but the many opportunities that exist for the writers to get involved too. And right now we're just letting everybody acclimate and decide how they feel about the secret being out. So we've got development on the fear side, where there's hate groups and small attacks going on, hate crimes throughout the nation and the world. And then you've got people going on YouTube and filming what they can do. You've got vigilantes who aren't afraid to show what they can do now. And then you've got regular people who are divided, whether it being a great thing or whether they're scared to death of these people. So it's kind of opened up a lot of different opportunities right now while we're in this transition.
Okay.
Actually going to have quite a bit of a problem as soon as people connect the Nemesis terrorist attacks to these newly outed EVOs. That's going to be a huge political fallout, really. People are going to be taking up arms as soon as they realize that these EVOs are the people conducting those terrorist attacks just a couple of years ago.
You seem to be starting to involve Heroes Reborn. Are you following the kind of show canon in the fact that, you had those kind of ebooks that came out and the games? Are they going to come first, or will it pretty much kind of be a mix of everything pre-Heroes Reborn and Heroes Reborn?
I think we're kind of looking at it as more of the mixture.
Okay.
We don't want to spend too long in this transition period.
I was just going to say, we want to get people plugged into Heroes Reborn as quickly as possible because that is what is fresh on everyone's mind. That's the story that everyone's talking about on the website. So that's what we want to try and get into play.
Okay. Well, all that's left to do is thank you guys from the Heroes the RPG. You'll be able to find the RPG in the show notes if you want to take part. So yeah, all that's left to do is thank you, Janey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Quill.
Yes, guys.
And thank you, Caboose.
Anytime.
You can find Primatech Files on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, or Clamour. Just follow Primatech Files. You can find our podcast on any podcatcher service. Again, just search Primatech Files. All that's left to say is thank you for listening to the podcast. Hope you found it entertaining and informative. And until next time, download the podcast, save the world.